The forest has always been a place of mystery, vast, beautiful, and unforgiving. For centuries, it's lured people in with promises of solitude and adventure, but not everyone who enters comes back the same, or at all. These are the stories of those who ignored the warnings, hikers who followed trails that weren't on any map, campers who heard voices in the trees, and wanderers who thought they were alone, until they realized they weren't. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. These are true accounts from people who dared to venture too deep into the woods and encountered something they were never meant to see. Story 1: The Whistling Pines. In the foothills of northern Oregon, nestled far from the busy trails and campsites, there lies a stretch of pine forest the locals quietly avoid, a region nicknamed the Whistling Pines. The name isn't metaphorical. When the wind cuts through the trees, it produces a low, melodic whistling sound that seems almost intentional. But the sound isn't what unsettles people. It's what happens when the whistling stops. Tyler Mendez, a 27-year-old amateur nature photographer, wasn't aware of any of this when he planned a weekend solo trip into the region. He'd been scrolling through satellite maps looking for untouched places to shoot, somewhere the Instagram crowd hadn't yet discovered. The Whistling Pines were remote, dense, and sat just outside the jurisdiction of any official hiking trails. It was exactly the kind of place he loved. He parked at the last known access road around noon on Friday, hiked 6 miles in, and set up camp in a small clearing beneath towering pines. The forest was serene. The air was cool and rich with the smell of moss and bark. But more than anything, it was quiet. No birdsong, no scurrying wildlife, not even the hum of insects. Just the wind and the whistling. At first, Tyler thought it was beautiful. It wasn't a constant sound, but would come and go in gentle rising tones as if someone was playing an old wooden flute. He even recorded it on his phone, planning to use it in a time-lapse edit. That night, the whistling became clearer, more pronounced, almost like a tune being played. It was slow, repetitive, mournful. Tyler lay in his tent, eyes open, listening. Something about it no longer felt natural. He tried to rationalize. Maybe the wind was catching knots or holes in the trees in a unique way. But deep down, a part of him knew it sounded too deliberate. At 2:14 a.m., he woke up suddenly. No whistling, no wind, just silence. And then, crunching. Footsteps, slow, methodical. Outside his tent, he froze. Every instinct in him screamed to stay still. The footsteps circled his tent once, then paused at the entrance. Tyler reached quietly for his camping knife and held his breath. After several seconds, the footsteps moved away, fading into the darkness. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. When morning came, he stepped outside to find the forest eerily unchanged. No footprints, no sign of animals. Just a pile of pine needles that had been neatly arranged in a circle near his tent. In the center was a small wooden whistle, carved roughly and wrapped with what looked like deer sinew. He took a photo and left the whistle alone. Deciding not to push his luck, Tyler packed up camp and started hiking back toward his car. But the trail seemed off. Twigs he swore he'd broken the day before were intact. A strange rock formation he'd used as a landmark was gone. After hours of walking, he wasn't any closer to where he'd started. He stopped, checked GPS, no signal. Compass, spinning in circles, and then the whistling returned. It was louder now, coming from all directions at once. It wasn't just the wind. It couldn't be. The tone had changed, higher pitched, faster, like a child's tune played wrong. Tyler shouted, trying to scare off whoever was toying with him. The whistling stopped. That's when he saw it. A figure standing between 2 pine trees. It was tall, thin, almost skeletal. He couldn't make out a face, but it held something long in its hand, a carved whistle. As Tyler stared, the figure lifted the whistle to where its mouth should be, and the tune began again. Tyler ran. He didn't care which direction. He crashed through brush, tore his clothes, and didn't stop until he hit a stream he didn't recognize. There, exhausted and terrified, he curled against a boulder and passed out from sheer fatigue. He woke up the next morning in a field, not the forest, being nudged awake by an older man in a ranger's uniform. "You were lucky," the ranger said. "People go missing in those woods all the time." Tyler explained what he'd seen, and the ranger just shook his head. "You went into the Whistling Pines. Locals know to stay out. That place doesn't like visitors." Back in town, Tyler retrieved the photos from his phone. Most were fine. Trees, sky, camp, except the one he took of the carved whistle. It was black. No data. Corrupted. When he played the video of the whistling, there was no sound, just static. He posted about it online. Some people believed him. Most didn't. But there's one thing he never told anyone, not even his closest friends. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind outside his apartment picks up just right, he hears it again. The same tune, the same slow, haunting melody. Only now it doesn't come from the trees. It comes from somewhere inside his apartment. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, that the experience in the forest had messed with his mind. Trauma, maybe. Auditory hallucinations. But the whistling always came at the same time. 2:14 a.m., the exact time he had woken up in the forest that night. At first, he'd sit up in bed, heart pounding, and listen closely. It always started faint, like it was coming from the vents or through the walls. But slowly, minute by minute, it grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be just outside his bedroom door. Every time he would get out of bed, open the door, and find nothing. Silence. But the moment he lay back down, it would start again. He stopped sleeping with the lights off. Then he stopped sleeping in his bedroom entirely, instead taking to the couch or even falling asleep with his TV blaring to drown out the sound. One night, about 2 weeks after he returned, he got a call from a restricted number. Groggy and half asleep, he answered. A single sound came through the speaker. The whistle. Slow, clear, unmistakable. He threw the phone across the room. The next morning, he packed a bag and left his apartment, moving in temporarily with his older sister across town. She didn't question him. Not much anyway. Tyler didn't explain why he kept a knife under his pillow or why he insisted on sleeping with the bedroom door bolted shut. But the whistle followed. Now it wasn't just sounds. There were objects. Once, he found a pine needle circle under his bed. Another time, a small stone placed on his windowsill that hadn't been there the night before. His sister's dog, an old golden retriever, refused to enter his room. It would bark and growl at the door, tail between its legs. Tyler began researching. He posted on obscure forums, reached out to paranormal investigators, even talked to a local historian about the area near the Whistling Pines. One old man, a retired logger named Earl Crenshaw, offered something strange. That forest wasn't always like that, Earl had said. Back in my daddy's time, it was just quiet land. But something changed around the 40s. A crew went missing. 5 men. They were cutting deeper into the woods than any before. Found their camp. Tents slashed. No bodies. Just a whistle, carved from bone. When Tyler showed him the photo, the corrupted one from his phone, Earl went pale. That's the same one. I remember it. That thing cursed this place. Said if you hear the tune, it means the forest has chosen you. Tyler pressed him for more, but the old man refused. He simply muttered, "If the whistling finds you, don't answer. Don't follow it, and for God's sake, don't ever whistle back." Tyler left shaken. That night, unable to resist, he listened closely when the tune came again. He recorded it, played it back, slowed it down, and that's when he heard something beneath the melody. Faint whispers. Words. Not in English. Maybe not in any human language. Sleep-deprived and obsessed, he made a choice. He drove back to the edge of the forest, whistle recording in hand, determined to end whatever had attached itself to him. The ranger station at the forest's edge was abandoned. The trail signs had been torn down. It was as if the forest itself didn't want to be found anymore. But Tyler knew where he'd camped. He knew the landmarks. He hiked in silence for hours until he found the clearing again. Only this time, it wasn't empty. There was a new circle of pine needles, larger now. In the center, a fresh wooden whistle. Carved, waiting. As he stepped closer, the whistling started, not from the trees, but from within the clearing. It echoed all around him, pressing in like 1,000 voices from the bark. He raised his phone, played the recording, and the forest seemed to freeze. Then the voice came. It wasn't human. It spoke not through sound, but through feeling, a deep vibration in his bones and his mind. It didn't speak words. It spoke intent. It wanted him to stay, to listen, to join. Tyler screamed and hurled the whistle deep into the woods. He ran, half blind with panic, tearing through thorns and branches until he collapsed near the road. A trucker found him the next morning, barefoot, bruised, and mumbling about songs in the trees. He never went back, but the whistling never stopped. Tyler moved to Arizona, No forests, no pines, just desert and open sky. Still, sometimes when the wind hits just right, he swears he hears it again. And on nights when he's alone and the world goes quiet, he finds himself humming the tune, the one he heard in the forest, the one he never wanted to remember. One night in Tucson, well past midnight, Tyler woke to the sound of the wind rattling his windows. At first, it was nothing unusual. Desert nights could be harsh. But then he realized the wind had a rhythm. It was slow, deliberate, rising and falling in a way no natural breeze ever would. It was whistling. He sat up, drenched in sweat, and reached instinctively for the knife he now kept taped beneath his bed frame. The room was still, but his instincts screamed danger. He checked every lock in the apartment, every window, every door. Nothing. Yet when he stepped into the bathroom and turned on the light, he saw it again. Pine needles, a small bundle of them, wet with dew, perfectly centered on his white-tiled sink. He backed away slowly, heart racing. There were no pine trees for hundreds of miles. The Sonoran Desert didn't grow them, not naturally. That night, Tyler didn't sleep. The next day, he paid someone to bless the apartment. Sage. Prayers. Salt at every door. But none of it worked. The signs continued. Birds began perching outside his window in patterns. Always three, always silent. He would find strange symbols drawn in condensation on his mirror. And once someone or something knocked on his window at precisely 2:14 a.m. He didn't look. But the knocking kept coming, night after night, same time, same rhythm. He recorded it once. When he played the recording back, there was no knock, only the whistle. Fainter now, but still there. Tyler became withdrawn, paranoid. His sister flew down to visit and was shocked at what he had become. Thin, pale, unblinking. She begged him to get help, a doctor, a priest, anyone. But Tyler just whispered, "It's listening." He no longer dared speak of the forest. He avoided mirrors. He kept his apartment cold, hoping it would deter the condensation marks, but nothing helped. Then, on the first anniversary of his night in the Whistling Pines, he vanished. Neighbors reported that his front door was wide open. His lights were still on, his keys and wallet on the table. But there was no sign of struggle. Only one strange detail stood out. A circle of pine needles in the middle of his living room floor, and on the center of the couch, a wooden whistle. Authorities listed him as missing. His sister refused to believe he simply disappeared. She searched the desert, posted on forums, pleaded for answers. She even visited the Whistling Pines herself, but found nothing except quiet woods and long shadows. Until one night, a year after Tyler's disappearance, she received a voice message from a restricted number. She listened in silence as the whistle played. Soft, slow, and somewhere deep beneath the sound, faint as breath, her brother's voice, "Don't follow the song. It never ends." The message ended. No one ever heard from him again. And now, on certain nights when the moon is low and the wind moves just right, hikers claim to hear a distant tune drifting through the pines. A soft, whistled lullaby, full of sorrow and longing. The forest, they say, remembers. And it's still looking for someone new to listen. Story 2, The Footsteps at Granite Hollow. Ben Travers wasn't the kind of man to believe in the supernatural. As a freelance geologist, he'd spent much of his life alone in remote wilderness, mapping strata and cataloging mineral deposits. So when he was offered a short contract surveying Granite Hollow, an isolated ravine in Oregon's Cascade Range, he jumped at the chance. It was the sort of place that had earned a quiet, uneasy reputation with local hikers. The ranger station had an old corkboard full of hand-drawn warning signs. "Stay out of the ravine after dark. Whistling will go back. Footsteps aren't always yours." Ben laughed them off. He was a man of science, after all. The hike to the site took half a day, through thick evergreens and up a narrow, rocky path that twisted into the ravine. It was beautiful, eerily untouched. The rocks glinted in the late afternoon light, and a small, overgrown cabin stood on the edge of the hollow, likely used by rangers years ago. Ben made camp inside. The walls were old but sturdy, and it kept out the chill. That first night was uneventful, aside from the silence. No insects, no birds, just the wind threading through the trees like a low breath. The second day, he explored the deeper edge of the ravine and noticed strange imprints in the mossy ground. Not animal tracks, human, barefoot, but large, too large. The steps were spaced unnaturally far apart, and each one was perfectly straight. No heel, no arch, just 5 long, narrow toes pressed deep into the earth. He took photos but didn't tell anyone. That night, he heard the first footsteps. It began at 3:09 a.m. Sharp, slow steps outside the cabin. Crunch, pause, crunch. The unmistakable rhythm of a biped. Ben sat up, holding his breath. Then it stopped, directly outside his window. He didn't move, didn't dare. When he finally worked up the courage to peek through the crack in the wooden shutters, no one was there. But the footprints were. A single line of bare prints leading right up to the cabin's wall, and none leading away. The third day, Ben ventured higher up the ridge to take core samples. He kept glancing behind him. Nothing followed. Still, the silence had shifted. The trees felt closer, heavier. He returned to the cabin before sunset and tried to ignore the gnawing paranoia building in his gut. That night, the footsteps returned, but this time, they were inside. It started with the sound of creaking floorboards, near the door, then near the fireplace, then by the kitchen counter. He clutched his flashlight and scanned the room. Empty. But the light flickered. Once, twice. Then he heard breathing. Low. Close. Almost beneath him. Ben shined the light under the cabin floorboards and saw the outline of bare feet pressed against the underside of the wooden slats. He screamed, grabbed his gear, and ran out into the woods without shoes or jacket. He didn't stop running for hours. By sunrise, he reached the ranger station, hysterical and bleeding from the brambles. A search party returned with him later that week. The cabin was gone. Where the structure once stood was only damp earth. No footprints. No sign of disturbance. But beneath the moss, searchers found one thing. A pair of his boots, neatly placed side by side, with pine needles stuffed inside. Ben never went back to fieldwork. He abandoned his scientific career, changed his phone number, moved across the country. When asked, he refused to talk about Granite Hollow. But once, during an interview, he whispered, they weren't just footsteps. They were echoes of something walking forever, looking for someone to take its place. Story 3, The Man in the Yellow Raincoat. It was the middle of June when Lisa and her fiancé, Derek, decided to take a weekend camping trip to Cedar Root Forest, a dense patch of woods in northern Washington that Derek had grown up near. He'd always spoken of the place with nostalgia, calling it peaceful, untouched, and magical in the rain. Lisa, a city girl who'd never really camped before, agreed reluctantly. What she didn't know was that Cedar Root held a memory Derek had never shared, a childhood incident that still haunted him. They arrived on a Friday afternoon, pitched a small tent near a creek, and spent the evening drinking boxed wine by the fire. It drizzled lightly, just as Derek predicted, and Lisa had to admit the mist made the forest look beautiful, like something out of a fairy tale. But as the sun disappeared and the fog thickened, the woods around them began to feel different. Derek stared into the trees for long stretches of time. "You okay?" Lisa asked. He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just brings back memories." That night, Lisa woke up around 2:17 a.m. to the sound of dripping. Not rain, something closer, rhythmic, wet. She unzipped the tent and stepped out, thinking it was a broken water bottle. What she saw instead froze her in place. Across the creek, just past the tree line, stood a man. Still as stone, wearing a long yellow raincoat. She couldn't see his face, but she could hear the sound, the dripping, coming from the hem of the coat. He didn't move, didn't speak. She whispered for Derek, but when she looked behind her, he was already outside the tent, staring at the same figure. "I've seen him before," Derek said softly. Lisa turned to him. "What? When I was 9, in these woods, he watched me for 3 nights, never came closer, never moved. I thought I'd imagined it." The figure took one step forward, then another. Lisa and Derek backed up toward the tent, hearts hammering, until the man suddenly stopped at the edge of the creek. The fog grew thicker, and then he was gone. No splash, no sound, nothing. They didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, they packed up and hiked out, both shaken but unsure of what they'd experienced. Back in town, Derek asked an old friend, a retired forest ranger, if he'd ever heard of something like that. The ranger looked uncomfortable and said, "You weren't the first. He's been spotted since the 60s, always in the rain, always watching. The locals used to say if you saw him 3 nights in a row, someone wouldn't make it out." Lisa left it at that. But Derek couldn't let it go. 2 months later, he went back alone. Lisa begged him not to, said it wasn't worth the risk. He promised he'd be careful, Just needed to see if the man was real or if it was all just his mind replaying childhood fear. That was the last time anyone saw Derek. A week later, his car was found near the same creek. The tent was still up. His journal, half wet from the rain, sat inside, open to the last page. In smeared ink, it read, "Night 3. He crossed the creek." The next morning, a search team scoured the forest. They found no sign of Derek. Only one thing out of place, a yellow raincoat draped over a tree branch, still dripping, even in the sun. Story 4. Don't follow the trail markers. Josh, a solo backpacker in his early 30s, was the kind of person who found calm in silence. Not city silence, but deep forest silence, where the only sounds were wind through the canopy and the occasional crack of a twig. He'd been hiking for years, documenting his adventures on a small YouTube channel. His latest trip was meant to be a 3-day trek through the Ironbone Trail, a little-known loop in a remote part of the Appalachian backwoods. Locals didn't talk much about the trail. There were warnings posted near the ranger station. Stay on marked paths. Do not hike after dark. Report strange trail markers. Josh had read them, but like most experienced hikers, he shrugged them off as precautions for amateurs. The trail started normally, beautiful if overgrown. Wildflowers choked the edges of the path, and old pine trees towered overhead. Josh filmed segments of himself walking, narrating the experience and pointing out the rusty hand-painted trail markers nailed to trees every 100 yards or so. On day 2, something changed. He noticed that the trail markers were newer, bright red paint instead of faded orange. Perfect circles. They hadn't been there yesterday. Odd, but he assumed maybe a new ranger had updated them. By dusk, Josh realized he wasn't where he was supposed to be. The trail twisted in on itself. He passed the same boulder 3 times. His compass spun erratically. His GPS refused to connect. And the new red markers, they seemed to multiply. One on nearly every tree now, almost guiding him somewhere. That night, he set up camp in a small clearing and uploaded a video log. His voice trembled a little as he said, "Something's not right with these woods. I think something is following me. I hear footsteps after I stop walking." That clip would later circulate online under the title, "His Last Upload." Around 3 a.m., Josh was jolted awake by a sound outside his tent. A dragging sound, like a shovel or a stick scraping across dirt, then footsteps. Slow, deliberate. He stayed perfectly still, didn't make a sound. When the noise stopped, he mustered the courage to unzip the tent slightly and peek out. Every tree around the clearing now had a red circle painted on it. Every single one. And in the center of the clearing stood a figure. Not a ranger. Not a person exactly. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and wrapped in torn canvas like an old scarecrow. Where its face should have been was just a blank wooden disc with a single red circle painted across it. Josh screamed and bolted. He ran into the woods without his pack, without his phone, without light. He followed the old trail markers, the faded orange ones, until they disappeared entirely. The red ones, however, were always there, leading, twisting, looping. He was never seen again. Weeks later, a search team found his tent empty, and dozens of red markers leading deeper into the forest, in places where the trail didn't even go. The footage from his camera survived, retrieved from the SD card left behind in his abandoned pack. His last frame, before the camera cut out, showed him staring into the woods, whispering one final line. "They made a trail for me, and now I can't leave it." Months after Josh's disappearance, rumors began spreading online. Conspiracy forums speculated that the red trail markers were part of some ancient symbol system, possibly protective wards, or worse, invitations. Reddit threads dissected the GPS anomalies and strange magnetic fields reported near Ironbone Trail. Locals refused to go near it. Rangers stopped maintaining the route altogether. Then came Emily Hayes. Emily wasn't a thrill seeker or hiker. She was Josh's younger sister, and she was angry. Nobody seemed to care enough to keep looking for her brother. The Rangers had quietly closed the area. Police gave up after 2 weeks. The few news articles about his disappearance were buried beneath Bigfoot theories and ghost hunting YouTubers chasing views. So she decided to go herself. Emily took a GoPro, extra batteries, a satellite phone, and a printed copy of Josh's last map. She uploaded daily updates to a private blog only a few friends had access to. She wasn't trying to go viral. She just wanted closure. Her first few days were uneventful, though eerie. Trees were strangely silent. Too few birds. The underbrush looked dead despite it being summer. And although she had GPS lock most of the time, her compass spun erratically every few hours. She followed the orange markers, just like Josh. By day 3, she reached the area where his tent had been found. Still undisturbed, still surrounded by red trail circles. She stopped updating her blog after that day. 3 weeks later, her satellite phone pinged a final location, deep in the restricted zone beyond Ironbone's last official loop. The ping lasted 6 seconds before vanishing. Search parties went in. Drones flew over. Nothing. Until 2 hikers, unrelated, took a wrong turn and ended up near that area, reporting a strange sight. A clearing filled with hand-painted red circles. But not just on trees, on rocks, on bones, and on a small wooden plaque nailed to a tree. 2 walked the circle. Now the trail is full. The plaque had no signs of age. The paint was fresh. No new searches have been authorized since. Locals insist the woods are choosing people, that every time someone ignores the signs and steps off the official path, the forest adds a new turn, a new trail. Some say you can still hear footsteps in those woods, footsteps that match your pace exactly until you stop. And then they don't. If you ever hike Ironbone and find yourself following a trail marked with perfect red circles, don't. Turn around. Even if they seem to guide you home. Because they're not leading you back. They're pulling you deeper. And once you see the man with the wooden face, it's already too late. Emily's disappearance didn't make headlines. Just a quiet post on a local news site. Missing woman possibly linked to 2022 hiker disappearance. No follow-up. No interviews, no pressure on the park services, almost like it was deliberately buried. But strange things started happening online. Josh's old blog, inactive for nearly a year, began updating again. Short entries, each one time-stamped at exactly 33 a.m. Cold. So many circles. She followed me. I told her not to. He's not a ranger. He wears their skin. Red is not a color here. It's a warning. They know when you read this. Friends and family who visited the blog said their devices would freeze for a split second. Some phones bricked entirely. One guy claimed his laptop camera turned on by itself and recorded 3 minutes of black screen. Just faint breathing in the background. When someone tried to trace the blog's IP, it pinged back from a location in the middle of Ironbone Forest. Coordinates didn't make sense. They pointed to a cliff that had collapsed 20 years ago. And then, someone tried to scrub the site. All the blog posts were deleted, but not before someone archived it. Today, the Josh Map subreddit is filled with users who try to decode his last GPS tracks. A few claim they've gone into Ironbone and returned. Most of them disappear from the forum after a few posts. One user, MapEater33, posted a final thread before deleting their account. It simply said, "There's no trail, only loops. Every step takes you back, but not to where you began. The forest folds. The red circles are not paint, they're mouths." A popular YouTuber made a video titled, "The Hayes Siblings and the Forest That Doesn't Let Go." It was demonetized almost instantly and removed after receiving a copyright claim, not from Emily or Josh's estate, but from a company called Pine Mark Logistics LLC. That company doesn't exist on any official registry. Its only online presence? A broken website with a loading screen that flickers a symbol, a perfect red circle. And if you wait long enough, a whisper plays through your speakers. It's faint, but if you listen closely, it sounds like another marker made. Next. In the weeks that followed, several hikers reported finding new trail markers deep in the Ironbone Forest. But these weren't made of paint or ribbon like the usual ones. These were carved into trees, deep, meticulous circles, each with a smaller concentric circle within, like a pupil inside an eye. Locals started calling them watcher marks. One man, a retired forest ranger named Bill Graves, came forward anonymously in a podcast and claimed the U.S. Forestry Service knows something's wrong with Ironbone. He said the area was quietly rezoned as non-recreational conservation land back in 1997, but local tourism boards kept pushing it as a destination for hiking and nature retreats. "It's a feeding ground," he whispered on the recording. "That's what we started calling it after 95. Not for animals, for them." When the host asked who they were, the call cut off. Attempts to trace the call failed. The number came back as disconnected, registered to a long-abandoned ranger station that burned down in 2003. Later that month, 3 urban explorers tried to livestream an overnight challenge in Ironbone. They followed the same route Emily and Josh had taken, hoping to drum up views. They never finished the stream, but for exactly 1 hour and 44 minutes, the video feed stayed live. Viewers saw the usual: dense woods, nervous laughter, crude jokes. But around the 48-minute mark, something changed. The team got quiet. The trees around them shifted, not swayed, shifted like the trunk subtly rotated when no one was looking. Then came the whistling, high, soft, tuneless, like air through a reed. One of them, a guy named Trevor, turned toward the sound and vomited instantly. Nosebleed. He whispered, "It's singing inside me," before collapsing. The last thing the camera captured was the team's flashlight spinning wildly and landing on a tree that had no bark, only layers of fabric stapled to its trunk. Jackets, hats, a child's pink scarf, the feed cut to black, and then for 3 full seconds, a face appeared. Not human. Too wide, too many teeth, eyes like tunnels. The platform auto-flagged the stream for graphic content and unclassified visual anomalies. Even re-uploads are banned. But those 3 seconds have become a kind of digital ghost. People claim if you pause other YouTube videos at exactly the 3:33 mark, you can sometimes glimpse her, the thing from the forest, reflected faintly in dark corners of the frame. They call her the Marker Mother. As for the hikers, none were ever found, except for their boots, all 3 pairs, perfectly placed in a triangle at the Ironbone welcome sign. Inside one boot, someone found a note, handwritten in red ink. "You were warned." Since then, Ironbone Forest has been quietly fenced off. No official announcement, no press release. Just dozens of no-entry signs and 2 unmarked black SUVs parked at the old ranger trail. But every once in a while, someone finds a fresh circle carved into a tree outside the perimeter. And sometimes, late at night, if you're standing near the fence, you'll hear the whistling. It's not the wind. It's the forest marking its next trail. Some believe the forest has grown restless, as if its hunger has become harder to contain. One night, a local dog walker named Miriam Lewis reported hearing the whistling just beyond her backyard. Her property bordered the outer tree line of Ironbone. She'd lived there for 17 years. Never heard a thing before. That night, her dog, a golden retriever named Rufus, refused to go outside. It growled low at the back door, hair raised, teeth bared. Then came the knock. Not on the front door, not on the back door, but on the glass of the kitchen window, 5 feet off the ground. Miriam turned just in time to see a face. Not a person. A mask, maybe, like tree bark grown into the suggestion of a face. Wide smile. No eyes. The whistling started again. Soft. Too soft for anything so large to make. Miriam screamed and ran upstairs, locked herself in the bathroom. By the time police arrived, nothing remained, except one thing. A watcher mark had been carved perfectly into her wooden fence. Since that night, Ironbone isn't just avoided, it's feared. A volunteer fire crew tried to start a controlled burn near the eastern edge of the forest last summer. The fire refused to spread. Not a spark caught on the trees. The flames simply died. One of the firefighters, Captain Laura James, was hospitalized shortly after. She wouldn't stop drawing circles with her fingernail into the hospital wall. Her knuckles were bleeding. All she would say, over and over, was, "The trails are already inside us." Urban legends have morphed into something bigger, something more organized. Online forums have dedicated entire subthreads to Ironbone phenomena. People share maps, videos, even sound files of supposed whistles recorded from miles away. But whenever someone gets too close to the truth, their accounts vanish. Accounts deleted, posts removed, users go dark. One such user, handle Treeline Voices, managed to post a thread with satellite images showing a perfect spiral pattern of trees that weren't there 2 years prior. The pattern was moving east, slowly, as if the forest was expanding on its own terms. The post was up for 3 minutes, before it disappeared, and his account was deleted, but not before someone took a screenshot. In the bottom corner of the satellite image, almost too faint to see, was a figure standing at the edge of the spiral. Too tall, head tilted, and carved into the ground at its feet was another circle. Some say the Marker Mother doesn't live in Ironbone anymore. They say she's walking, leaving signs, whistling, always whistling. And if you hear it, faint and breathless outside your window, don't follow it, don't look, and never ever step where the circles begin. Tough.